This evening, our guest will be Galip Dalay, and we'll be talking about Turkey's foreign policy. But first, let's take a look at the developments of the week. EU leaders met in Brussels on October 1st for 2 days of discussions on, among other issues, tensions in the Eastern Mediterranean and relations with Turkey.
The EU's conclusions were released early Friday after 27 EU leaders discussed the situation in the Eastern Mediterranean and ties with Turkey in the aftermath of the tension between Ankara and Athens. European Council President Charles Michel said that the bloc agreed to adopt a two-track strategy towards Turkey and wants to give a chance to constructive political dialogue, but warned that all options are on the table if that was not the case. He said the EU pact encouraged political dialogue based on common interests, but added that the EU offered full support for Greece and the Greek Cypriot administration and noted that the bloc expected Ankara to take positive steps. According to Michel, the EU would rather have a positive agenda with Turkey, which it expects not to take any unilateral steps. He said the European Pact also supports efforts to establish a dialogue between Athens and Ankara and the restart of Cyprus negotiations under the auspice of the UN. Stating that the leaders taking part in the event suggested establishing a multilateral conference to resolve disputes in the Eastern Mediterranean, he further noted that the EU Council would monitor developments and re-evaluate the issue once again in December. Turkey's foreign ministry described the conclusions of the summit as partially positive. However, the ministry stressed that Brussels should impose pressure on Greek Cyprus to recognize the rights of Turkish Cypriots on the hydrocarbon reserves.
The coalition government of the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus has fallen after the People's Party announced its withdrawal from the government on Wednesday.
The withdrawal came as a reaction after Prime Minister Ersin Tatar from the National Unity Party announced in a joint conference with President Erdogan that Varosha, Maraş, an abandoned town since the 1974 war, would reopen on October 8th. The People's Party stated that the Prime Minister had not informed them about the issue in advance. People's Party Chair Yenal Senin also noted that the announcement came just before Sunday's presidential election and thus considered it an interference with the elections. PM Tatar did not give any information to his government partner and also didn't inform Kudret Özersay, the deputy PM, and his rival in the presidential election. PM Tatar has denied that he didn't inform the ministry and criticized the HP for withdrawing from the government. After the presidential election, the National Unity Party will both put other coalition options and snap elections on its agenda and make the best decision for our people, the PM remarked. Varosha, or Maraş, a coastal town in Cyprus's Famagusta, has been close to settlement following Turkey's second Cyprus peace operation in the 1974 war that eventually divided the island. The town was close to settlement as it was on the green line between the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus and the Republic of Cyprus.
This evening, our guest is Galip Dalay. Galip Dalay is a non-resident fellow at the Brookings Doha Center and Richard van Weizsäcker Fellow at Robert Bosch Academy.
Good evening, Mr. Dalay. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
So I'd like to start with a general question regarding Turkey's foreign policy, as the number of conflicts in which Turkey is directly involved in has increased in numbers in the last 10 days with the addition of Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, where Turkey has voiced support for Azerbaijan. Also considering the conflict in the Eastern Mediterranean, the intervention in the Northern Cyprus elections, not to mention Syria and Libya, how do you evaluate Turkey's position as a foreign policy actor? What are some of perhaps the common characteristics in its foreign policy decisions across these regions?
Well, I mean, part of the Turkey's foreign policy direction is very much related to what is happening at the systemic level, at the international level, because Turkey believes that the liberal international order, how it was described, to describe the post-Second World War order, is in one way or either crumbling or coming to an end. And the thing that is emerging in its place is, once again, the power politics, the sphere of influence politics, in a sense that will resemble more and more the 19th century idea of the international politics, where the major powers has their sphere of influences, and then the competition and the power politics defines the nature of the international politics. So from this perspective, I think that the idea in Turkish leadership mind is the following, that there is different centers of power in world today, and the Turkey's interests are better served by engaging in a balancing act between the different centers of power. So in this reading, the West is no longer has this special place in Turkey's geopolitical imagination, but the West is becoming more and more a center of powers among many centers of power, and the Turkey believes that a balancing act between them will serve its interests better. And that when you operationalize this in real foreign policy terms, look at Syria. I think that Turkey believes that by engaging Russia in Syria, this is how Turkey got on the on the ground in the first place, because after the Russian jet incidents of 2015, Turkey was pretty much cut off from the Syrian scene. And once Turkey patched up the things with Russia and engaged in a balancing act between the US and Russia in Syria, Turkey thought that now it got a better bargaining position, both vis-a-vis Russia and vis-a-vis Turkey as well, vis-a-vis US as well too. So one part of what is happening, it's the idea that the world politics is undergoing a systemic, a qualitative change, and Turkey believes that it's adapting to it. From this perspective, Turkey doesn't think that what it does is abnormal. Rather, it thinks that this is the new normal. But this is like more systemic part of it. The second part of it, that what Turkey is doing internationally cannot be decoupled from what is happening internally, because in the end, now Turkey is the foreign policy or domestic political vision are the product of the ruling alliance or the governing alliance within the country as well too. And now you have the government is in partnership with the neo-nationalist, nationalist Euro-Asianist group, and this and all elements of this alliance are very much behind the idea that that Turkey needs to prioritize hard power means over the soft power ones, and then secondly, Turkey needs to adopt a heavy-handed approach to many issues that is at hand. You see this domestically, pretty much the public sphere in Turkey more and more securitized and more, if not criminalized in some contexts. You can clearly see this when it comes to treatment of the opposition, when it comes to Kurds, particularly on the Kurdish question. You have like one of the most nationalist, perhaps like one of the most nationalist government structure in place in decades. So, and then you see the reverberation of this in foreign policy as well too. So, in a sense, the domestic roots of this foreign policy is very much there as well too. And then the third point, this is a learning process. So this is not like what we are seeing, the foreign policy dimension of Turkey. This is not the end point. This is a learning process, and the result of this learning has been the following. Thus far, Turkey believes that the benefit of this heavy-handed approach or the hard power leading approach or the military foreign policy has been greater than its cost. So when the benefit has been greater than its cost, Turkey believes that it can continue with it. But let's say there will be a point in which Turkey might think now the cost is greater than the benefit, then we might see a policy revision back then. Because in the end, what Turkey applies, Turkey now tries and goes. It applied in Syria, it thinks that it worked out. It applied in Libya, it thinks that it worked out. It applied in Eastern Mediterranean, it thinks that it worked out. Now it's applying to Nagorno-Karabakh or in Iraq, in northern Iraq as well too. So and in all these places, from Turkish perspective, the policy has a clear feature, which is the disruption, the policy of disruption. Turkey doesn't put in place a new game plan. Turkey disrupts what it thinks that the previous game plan that was inimical to its interest. Look at the Eastern Mediterranean. What Turkey is putting in place is not a new game plan. What Turkey is effectively putting in place that the other game plan will not work if Turkey feels that it's been very much contained or it's being excluded from the emerging energy and security order in the Eastern Mediterranean. So in this regard, Turkey thinks the previous status quo was inimical to its interest, and as a result of this reading, it adopts a policy of disruption this status quo.
Thank you, Mr. Dalay. There's a couple of things I'd like to dissect from what you said. First of all, in relation to Russia and the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. Now, Russia is also an actor in this region, and its position is perhaps a bit more divided between the two countries because it has troops on the ground in Armenia, and but it sells weapons to both sides. So Putin has been conducting telephone diplomacy, calling for a ceasefire. However, Turkey seems to be directly engaged on the Azeri side, and openly voicing its unconditional support for the country. Do you think it would be possible to lead this situation will lead to tensions with Russia in the near future, or can a similar kind of arrangement or collaboration with Russia that was done in Syria be adopted for this region?
Well, the sources of tension in Turkish-Russian relationship are inbuilt into the structure of this relationship. Because in the end, the Turkish-Russian geopolitical aspiration, the alliance structure, the foreign policy goals are competitive in almost all their neighborhood, in almost all the conflicts or tension that they are involved in, be it in Syria, be it in Libya, be it in larger Middle East, be it in Balkans, be it in Central Asia, be it in Black Sea. So in this regard, structurally, the sources of tension in Russian-Turkish relationship are there and are very much built into the fabric of this relationship. However, Turkey and Russia in recent years also developed a very interesting type of relationship. To some extent, many people will argue actually this is very much reflective of the nature of the relationship in coming ages as well too, where you see that both countries on the one hand, they have quite a competitive relationship. On the other hand, they engage in quite cooperative arrangements, which basically, make sure that they manage their difference in a sense. That becomes managing the difference part. In Nagorno-Karabakh, so if the question is, I don't think that we will see a complete breakdown of the relationship or tension that will be unmanageable. But I also don't think that we will be seeing an Astana-style process on Nagorno-Karabakh as well too, for a very simple reason. I think the difference between, let's say, Syria and Libya and Nagorno-Karabakh from the Russian perspective, Azerbaijan and Armenia are forming the post-Soviet space, and Russia enjoy very good and very close relation with both sides, not only one side. So the difference between Turkey and Russia can call and speak to the both sides of the conflict at the same time and enjoy very cordial and very good relationship with them. So I think the Turkish interest, the Turkish would prefer, the Turkish government would prefer that it starts a process that, in a sense, similar to Astana process or another bilateral track with Russia, that can more and more even, if not replacing the Minsk, but reducing the importance of the Minsk group. But when I look at it from the Russian side, I don't see that the Russia having a similar interest in this. I think that Russia would still want to keep on to the Minsk, because through the Minsk that it engages with the US and Europe as well too. So the relationship is competitive on Nagorno-Karabakh as well too. The tension is the source of tension will be there, but I think the actors will manage their difference there. But I also don't think that we will be seeing an Astana style process on Nagorno-Karabakh bilaterally conducted by Turkey and Russia. But definitely we will be seeing many diplomatic engagement between the both sides, but this will not morph into a full-fledged process as you have seen on Syria.
Mr. Dalay, you also mentioned that Turkey's foreign policy is a product of its of internal domestic politics, and that the alliance with the neo-nationalists has also perhaps been a reason for this more kind of assertive or disruptive stance on an international level. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Northern Cyprus. There are elections coming up this weekend, and the decision to open Varosha, which has been, a closed down to settlement for the past 46 years, was done by the Cypriot Prime Minister in Ankara with President Erdogan. And this, opening is perceived as a threat by the Greek Cypriots because it relates to their property rights and so forth. So, can Erdogan's intervention in the Northern Cyprus elections perhaps be related to this kind of more nationalistic domestic stance, or can it perhaps be seen as an extension of its Eastern Mediterranean policies?
Well, I didn't follow. I mean, the timing of it is interesting to say the least. And as it's usually said in Turkish, it's coming right before the election. But I don't know. I didn't follow the development quite closely, to be honest. So therefore, like, I will not be able to like make much comment. But like what we see at the broader level, the domestic politics and the foreign policy is intimately interconnected, and the personal element is very much there. I mean, look at the Turkish-Russian relationship. To what extent was it like an Erdogan-Putin relationship, and to what extent was it a Turkish-Russian relationship? I mean, at the policy level, it doesn't matter whether it's an Erdogan-Putin relationship, whether it's a Turkey-Russia relationship, because policy-wise, that doesn't make a difference. But it makes a difference when it comes to projecting the future of this relationship. So if we are talking about the present picture of this relationship, the difference between whether this was like, a relationship that was essentially built around the Putin and Erdogan, or was it like, this is a relationship that was very much, built around the institution, so that we can call it like a Turkey-Russian relationship. For the current, for the present time, doesn't matter, because like in the end, this is the government, he's the president, and he will make the decision. So, but when it comes to projecting this relationship, whether this relationship will continue in the same shape and form after, let's say like, Putin and Erdogan are not in office anymore, then it makes sense to analyze this relationship in terms of its institutional basis, elite basis, and structural foundation. So in this regard, still this relationship very much built around two presidents. So in this regard, it's still very much Erdogan-Putin. But if this relationship continues in this current form and shape for another, let's say like 5 years, then the structural foundation of this relationship will be very much there. And even in, let's say like post-Erdogan, post-Putin, this relationship will continue for some time still very closely, because by then the interlinkages on the strategic foundation, on the strategic level, will be quite significant. Again, on the regional Kurdish question, I mean, to what extent can you really decouple from the Turkey its own heavy-handed approach right now to the Kurdish question internally? This is very much right now what Turkey at the regional level, what you see, the Turkey having an identity crisis as a result of its own identity crisis at the domestic level, because it could not like conceive a form of identity that could very much be at peace with the Kurdishness. So the inability to advance a form of identity, a form of democratic framework within which you can tackle with the Kurdish political demands or the democratic rights, then translate itself into a heavy-handed approach to the Kurdish question domestically, the securitization of the Kurdish question domestically, and then the securitization of very much like the Kurdish question across the region as well too. So in this regard, one of the trouble that people usually have when it comes to denoting the foreign policy orientation of Turkey is actually related to domestic politics orientation of Turkey. What is the future domestic politics-wise? What is the future of Turkey 10 years from now? If Turkey is like on the road to be a much more democratic country, because if this is the case, then the foreign policy of this vision will be different than the foreign policy of a vision in which like you envision Turkey more and more a closed and introverted and undemocratic countries as well too. Because just look at the nature of the relation with Russia, with China. Is Turkey's silence? Why Turkey is so silent on the Uyghurs plight in Russia? In China. That's very much related to domestic politics, because its expectation of the financial rewards, financial gains to be coming, expectation of financial rewards, financial gains that Turkey thinks that it can make from China at a time when the Turkish economy is experiencing one of its worst crises. Look at the currency devaluation, look at the unemployment rate, look at inflation. So in almost in every single indicator of the economic well-being, the country is experiencing one of its deepest crises. And how it affects the Turkish foreign policy? Well, complete silence on the China's persecution of the Uyghur. So at the time, in this regard, Turkey is in company with countries like Egypt, Saudi Arabia, UAE, or some African countries when it comes to the Chinese treatment of the Uyghur Muslim population, and absolutely uttering, keeping almost like an absolute silence, to the extent that recently 39 countries called upon China to open Uyghur area for international inspection. Turkey was not even among this one. So this is not a foreign policy. This is not the result of Turkish foreign policy. This is the result of Turkish domestic politics. The fact that when the fact that your economic foundation are terrible, and you very much you are on quite bad terms with many other centers of powers, and that makes you more and more actually vulnerable towards the Chinese whim and wishes. So in this regard, once there was a fashionable word to describe Turkish foreign policy was the search for autonomy. If you applied this to Turkish-Chinese relationship, what you see actually it's strategic vulnerability that is Turkey developing vis-a-vis China. The fact that Turkey thinks that it cannot utter a single word of criticism on Chinese treatment of the persecution of the Uyghur, which is right now one of the worst forms of the Islamophobia in 21st century. This is telling quite something about the nature of the domestic politics in Turkey and the nature of the government in the world affairs.
Galip Dalay, thank you so much for especially demonstrating the links between domestic politics and Turkey's stance as a foreign policy actor as well. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you very much.
Facebook has rejected Turkey's requirement within its new social media regulations to appoint legal representatives. The company's decision was announced through cyber rights activist Yaman Akdeniz's Twitter account on October 5th. As Facebook owns multiple social media platforms, this decision will also concern WhatsApp and Instagram.
Bilgi University Law School faculty member Professor Yaman Akdeniz tweeted on October 5th that Facebook is not going to appoint a legal representative to Turkey. Professor Akdeniz explained to Medyascope that he received the news through a phone call where Facebook informed him about their final decision. Frankly, I was surprised by Facebook's decision. I thought Twitter would be the first to decide something like this. However, I perceive this as an elating decision. In this manner, a social media giant like Facebook has publicly announced that it does not accept the oppressive and restrictive order in Turkey. The new social media regulation went into effect on October 1st in Turkey. Under this new law, media platforms with over 1 million followers are required to appoint legal representatives who will be obliged to report the platform's activities to the government. This law will place the social media giants under Turkish jurisdiction. I told them initially that they should not conform to Turkey's new social media law under these terms and conditions. I told them sharply that the democratic institutions are not operating in Turkey. I warned them on the note that they will have to abide by all the accounts the Turkish government implements on the media. Therefore, Facebook's decision coincides with my point of view. It is not a decision to be underestimated. It is definitely going to affect the decisions that Twitter, Google, and YouTube are going to take as well. If these social media giants do not comply with this requirement, they will face serious implementations. They will face administrative fines up to 40 million Turkish liras, advertisement bans, and gradual lowering of their bandwidth in the country that can go up to 90%.
And now for an update on the coronavirus cases in Turkey. As of October 8th, the Ministry of Health reported 1,615 new patients of the novel coronavirus and 1,398 more recoveries over the past 24 hours. The overall patient count now stands at 330,753, with recoveries totaling 290,352, according to the ministry's data. President Erdogan announced on October 5th that in-person education is to start for 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 8th, and 12th graders. As Turkey expands grades for in-person education, the plan to distribute 500,000 tablets to students is set to start next week.
Following the official announcements and updates on the government's face-to-face education policies, more students are to take in-person classes as of October 12th. In accordance, the Minister of Education, Ziya Selçuk, announced on Twitter that primary, vocational, rural, and special needs schools will begin in-person education on October 12th. Preschool and first graders had already started in-person schooling on September 21st, while other students continued with remote learning. As concerns and questions rose from the public on the possible risks of going back to in-person education, member of the Public Health Specialists Association, Professor Dr. Taceddin İnandı, spoke to Medyascope. Professor İnandı said the following about the public health aspects of face-to-face education. How safe is reopening schools in person? The answer depends on each city's health condition and, to be more particular, each school community's health condition. However, what is crystal clear is that reopening schools in person will cause a nationwide rise in the number of cases. The severity of this increase depends on how much people will take the necessary health measures seriously. Regarding the most viable precautions that can provide a safer in-person education environment, Professor Dr. İnandı stated that the societies that have been managing the pandemic successfully and that have managed to keep it under control have put scientific and practical criteria regarding the reopening of schools. These criteria consist of the pandemic's frequency rate or a city's condition in the last 15 days. If the cases were on the rise, they chose to keep schools closed in that area. They also examined the medical department's capacity and resource sufficiency. Unfortunately, since Turkey does not follow a transparent policy, we cannot know how and why do they want to reopen face-to-face education. In line with the government's plan to reconstruct the education system, 500,000 students will be given a free tablet computer next week. This was announced by President Erdogan on October 5th, following a cabinet meeting in Ankara.
This week, Istanbul housed two long-awaited openings. The first one was the reopening of the Galata Tower following restoration. The other was an exhibition unveiling one of the three original portraits of Mehmet the Conqueror at the Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality's Saraçhane building.
The opening unveiling the portraits of Mehmet the Conqueror took place on October 6th, the anniversary of the liberation of Istanbul in 1922. The painting, made in 1480, was met with great enthusiasm by art lovers and history fans. The Istanbul Metropolitan Municipality had purchased the portrait made by Italian painter Gentile Bellini from the United Kingdom. The painting is one of the three surviving portraits of Mehmet. The others are part of the London National Gallery's permanent collection. It was put on auction and purchased by the municipality for 6,500,000 Turkish liras. The exhibition will be open to visitors until December 6th at the Metropolitan Municipality's Saraçhane building. Mehmet is known for having conquered the then Constantinople, today's Istanbul, and brought an end to the Byzantine Empire. On October 6th also, Galata Tower reopened following a 3-month restoration process. The restoration process has been subject to controversy due to the renovation methods used. From now on, the terrace of the tower will be reached by elevator, but while coming down, stairs will be used instead so that one can see all the floors of the tower. The restaurant and cafe inside the tower have been removed. On August 13th, a video recorded on a mobile phone of restoration workers drilling down the stone wall of the 14th century tower created a political firestorm. In the video, 2 restoration workers were seen drilling a corner of the inner wall of the tower with jackhammers.
That's all from This Week in Turkey. See you next Friday at 9 p.m. Good night.